You are listening to the 10-Minute Checkpoint podcast with me, SanchoWest, where I talk about video games, movies, music, anything underneath the sun for 10 minutes, and I appreciate your support. This is our third episode here on YouTube, of course. If you're an audio listener, you can find us on Soundcloud and Spotify, and if you can leave an awesome review wherever you are, I would appreciate it. Today is going to be an awesome show, but let's go ahead and start without any delay. Let's go ahead and put 10 minutes on the clock, and here we go. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the biggest news. I was kind of wondering, like, what am I going to talk about for the 10-minute checkpoint podcast? And lo and behold, it falls right into my lap at the last hour. It is the huge news that I would say, because for the longest time, I've been wondering, let's go ahead and hit it. Twisted Metal has been slated to be developed by Lucid Games. And that right there leads me to this statement, or I would say, question: will Twisted Metal flop again? That's going to be interesting to think about. I've been saying this for the longest time, that PlayStation, the entire vibe, desperately needs its big franchise, its old school franchise games to make a comeback, and Twisted Metal is definitely one of those. You think of other games like Kill Streak. You think of other games like, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, for PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, for crying out loud. I mean, there is so many awesome franchises out there, especially in the multiplayer, that needs the comeback. I mean, Resistance, Fall of Man would be an amazing multiplayer in this current gen. So let's go ahead and talk about the big news again. One, you got to think about it. Twisted Metal is coming back. That in itself is a huge thing to celebrate. I mean, considering that it's been something that we've been waiting for the longest time. By far, my favorite Twisted Metal is Twisted Metal Black. I remember it. It had the painted black by the Rolling Stones. It had very, very memorable stories. By far, those are my favorite parts about Twisted Metal. The stories for each individual fighter or car driver, whatever, driver, so to speak, combatant. And then at the same time, you had like a very like twisted ending. And I just thought it was just so fun. I remember grinding that, trying to unlock everything for every single character, trying to get all the endings. And Calypso was the main thing from what I remember. You just cannot deny that that was something that worked really well. Now, the reason why I asked, will Twisted Metal flop again, was simply because the last iteration on the PlayStation, what's the PlayStation 3, dude? I'm trying to think of it. If it wasn't PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 4, it was Twisted Metal 3. It feels like, I just remember, the reason why I don't remember it that well, because I didn't play it that much, but from what I remembered, it was a class system where you pick a certain character and you had access to a certain car type. And I remember being a diesel, and I just remember it not being that good. It was just not Twisted Metal. When I was talking to it on my Twitch stream on twitch.tv/SanchoWest, trying to talk about this podcast, we talked about what was Twisted Metal. We talked about the characters, and we talked about the aforementioned thing. And one of my members, Roach Class, talked about this thing that it is probably one of the original battle royales that you could think of. Now, granted, it wasn't a huge sprawling map, but the maps were pretty sizable, and it was just a fight to the finish. And at the same time, you had these long, drawn-out matches. It was about third partying. If you really think about it, it was about finding the secrets, powering up. The level loot was out there. It was just more of an arena deathmatch. So I guess he was right when he made that statement on my stream. It is sort of like the OG of battle royales. There was nothing like being there at the very end. Granted, the multiplayer for Twisted Metal Black wasn't that great. A lot of people kind of, it was just the infrastructure at the time. But there was a lot of those kind of car deathmatch combative games. I think of Vigilante 8 as well. I can't believe that game was out on the Nintendo 64, and that in itself is just wild to me. But there were some really solid games. And I guess what ended up happening when the Twisted Metal came out into the PlayStation 3, it was a PlayStation 3. I guess when it came out on the PlayStation 3, it just was a dated thing. It just wasn't the same. And so now that everybody's thinking about, Twisted Metal making a return, is what's it going to look like? Modernized, right? I think the graphics, of course, are going to look amazing and all that. But I hate to say this, and I know I'm like, I just feel like, should I just change this podcast to the Battle Royale podcast? Because it just seems to be something that it's just one of those topics that a lot of people, either you hate it or you love it. But what Twisted Metal just makes sense for Battle Royale. I'm not the guy that always says, oh, this game deserves a battle royale. I don't think Rogue Company would be a great battle royale game. I don't think there's no way that it would fit that way. It just doesn't feel right. But Twisted Metal will make an amazing battle royale. And it kind of reminds me, there is a game that does exist that is a car game that is a battle royale, and it's called Not My Car. I have played it. It was a very fun thing. The only thing is the lobby's kind of, it's not as big. It's not a very popular game. It is available on Steam, on PC, and I believe it is available on PlayStation. I could be wrong about that. Forgive me, but I remember seeing it available on consoles. But regardless, I played it on Steam, and it is a very interesting thing. It feels like you're in PUBG map, and you're out there, and you pick up weapons, and you have these things, and it really does work. I just think what misses is like the name itself is weird, Not My Car, so that's why it's not really that popular. But at the same time, I really do feel that it just lacks that character that Twisted Metal has. Twisted Metal naturally has this characters and all these different slew of characters, and it has lore that I could really think it could really push it over the edge. Now, granted, I don't think it'll be like, maybe it could be like a create your own character type of battle royale experience. But again, I just feel like if it doesn't have the Sweet Tooth, it doesn't have the Mr. Grimm's, I just think it won't have as much legs. And I feel like it would face the same fate as a previous Twisted Metal. Like that in itself, it needs to have, it's traditional. Like it's strange to say, but you have to be a traditionalist when it comes to Twisted Metal. And the news that kind of sprung all this is that multiple media reports suggest that it is from VGC. They are saying that the Twisted Metal is actually going to be slated to be developed by Lucid Games. Now, you may not know who Lucid Games is, but Lucid Games is actually the developer of Destruction All-Stars. And Destruction All-Stars was supposed to be a launch game for the PlayStation 5, but it got delayed to February. It did up coming out as a PlayStation Plus game. And it is a vehicular combat game, but it had no guns, no weapons. It was mainly like a Burnout type vibe, and you were in this game show type arena, and your whole thing was to rack up points. It had some different modes here and there, but the main mode was called Mayhem. And I did a review of it, and early impressions on the Checkpoint podcast, if you want to check it out, for the 10-minute Checkpoint podcast. And my early impressions of that game was that it was good. There were some good bones there, not a lot of meat. All the animations themselves, the characters design, and even the character select screen were really awesome. And at the same time, the moment-to-moment action was there. The locomotion and the animations of going in and out of cars was there. There was something there. And I think I keep talking about the only issue I had with it was that there was no carrot to keep chasing after. It was just very, very small bites. It was an appetizer of fun that Destruction All-Stars had. And I think that's why it really didn't do well. Unfortunately, it fell flat on its face. And it quickly went from a full-fledged $70 game, well, like I mentioned, PlayStation Plus game, to down to like a $20 game. And no doubt it would be one of those games that you just pick up when it's free or very low price. But I really do believe that Lucid Games, to go back to the original question, will Twisted Metal on the PlayStation 5 be a flop? The answer, I don't think so. And I think a lot of people would hold a black mark against Lucid Games for their, like I was saying, stumbling out of the block with their initial game, Destruction All-Stars. I did interview the devs for a Twitch Weekly on the show, and they are very passionate about their game. They love their game. They love all their characters that they design. And you could just tell that there is a lot of drive, no pun intended, behind the Lucid Games. And I, for one, don't think it will be a flop. It just has to make sure it checks off those check boxes, so to speak, when it comes to a Twisted Metal game. And I really do believe it's going to need a battle royale. I just think it's one of those things that be very unique to the battle royale space. Just to go back into that previous episode that we have, our battle royales done. I think there's a lot of themes and different atmospheres and different environments that a battle royale could definitely explore. And one of them is vehicular combat. It just has to be. I mean, if you add like 100 cars, you have a really cool thing. I think that Not My Car had a very cheesy drop-in where your car sprang wings. Maybe it is a Spawn thing, but regardless, at the end of the day, if you're a PlayStation fan, you have to be excited that there is investments into the multiplayer side of things already that we talked about. Naughty Dog is talking to have a standalone game. They are working on it. They did confirm in the Last of Us note, the infamous Naughty Dog note, And now we got to take this other awesome news that Twisted Metal will be developed. There is going to be a Twisted Metal TV show as well. So the rumor has it that it will be out around that time. And if that is the case, you're looking at 2023. So let me know in the YouTube comments, what was your favorite Twisted Metal character? Mine was basically Mr. Thumper was one of them, but I'd leave one of them was Shadow, and he had this awesome hearse that he would throw the shadows forward and behind him, and he was really solid. So you cannot forget those awesome characters. So let me know in the comments yours. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the 10-Minute Checkpoint Podcast. Don't forget to leave a like and share and subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you're on the audio side of things, be sure to leave a thumbs up or a follow or a review. Whatever you are listening has a thing to give some positivity. Thank you so much. Have a good night.